There is an Italian, a Frenchman, and an American sitting in a bar talking, and the Italian is bragging that last night he made love to his wife 3 times, and this morning his wife made him breakfast in bed and told him how amazing he was the night before. The Frenchman said, "That's nothing. I made love to my wife 5 times last night, and then this morning, to show her appreciation, she made me breakfast in bed and told me how much she loved me and gave me head while I ate my breakfast." Then the men turned to the American and asked him how many times he made love to his wife the night before, and he said, "Only once." The 2 men started laughing, and the Frenchman asked him what his wife said to him this morning, and the American smoothly replied, "Don't stop." A man walks into a hooker bar in New Orleans and says to the madam of the house, "I would like to see Meline." The madam says, "Meline is our most expensive woman at $1,000 a night." The guy says, "No problem," and lays down $1,000 in cash. Meline comes downstairs, they both go back upstairs, they made love, and the man leaves. The next night, the man shows up and requests Meline again, throws down $1,000, and Meline and the guy go upstairs and screw around. After they're done, Meline tries to make small talk and asks him where he's from. The guy says, "I'm from Philadelphia." Meline jumps up in surprise and says, "Really? Me too." The guy says, "Yeah, I know. Your father just passed away and your brother wanted me to give you $2,000. An old man joins a nudist colony and he sees a pretty lady, so he gets an erection. The lady then comes up to him and says, "Are you calling me?" The old man replied, "I don't know, I'm not sure." The lady then explains to the old man that if you do it, it means you are calling the nearest lady. So then the old man makes love with the lady. After that, the old man enters the sauna. He sits, and then he suddenly farts. The big man next to him then says, "Are you calling me?" The old man then replied, "I don't know, I'm new here." The man then explains to the old man that when you fart, it means you are calling the nearest guy, so the big man does his thing to the old man. After that, the old man walks to the counter of the nudist colony. He says, "You can keep the $500 membership fee. I'm out of here." The receptionist then says to the old man, "Why? You've only been here for a couple of hours." The old man replies, "Listen up, I'm 78. I get 1 erection every month, and to add to that, I fart 15 times a day." Joe said to Sue, "Hey, Sue, I just heard that Bill has a rare illness and that he would die if he were not to get some mother's milk. I know it's strange, but he's my best mate, and I don't want him to die. Since you have just given birth, could you help him out?" Sue replies, "I don't know, Joe. Would you be fine with such an arrangement?" Joe replies, "Since it will save his life and you will only have to do it once, why not?" Sue, "Well, if you really want me to." Joe, "Thanks, Sue." The next day, Joe brings Bill home and gets Bill and Sue into a room. Bill starts to suck Sue's milkful breast. After 15 minutes, Sue starts to get horny and asks Bill if he would desire anything else. Bill, "No, thanks, Sue. I'm fine." Another 15 minutes, and Sue is really horny and repeats to Bill her offer again. Bill, "No, thanks, Sue. I am fine." 10 minutes later, Sue has hit the roof. With a husky and demanding voice, she says to Bill, "Are you sure you don't want anything else, Bill?" Bill, "Well, since you insist, I could do with some cookies with the milk." A midget with a lisp decided to buy a horse. Went out to a farm and asked the farmer if he had a horse for sale. "I sure do. Come around back and I'll show her to you." Out back, the midget walked around the horse and asked the farmer if he could see her teeth. The farmer lifted him up to see the horse's teeth, then put the midget back down. The midget walked around the horse again and asked if he could see her ears. The farmer, getting irked, obliged him again. Third time around, the midget asked if he could see her. By now the farmer was pissed, walked the midget around to the back side of the horse and said, "You want to see her? I'll show you her, oh." With that, he hoisted the midget up and crammed his head into the horse's. Little arms and legs flailing, he waited a few seconds and pulled the midget out and set him back down on the ground. Midget gets up, shakes his head, gasps for air, and says, "Perhaps I should rephrase that. Can I see her run around for a few minutes?" A fellow walks into a bar, very down on himself. As he walks up to the bar, the bartender asks, "What's the matter?" The fellow replies, "Well, I've got these two horses," sniff, sniff, "and, well, I can't tell them apart. I don't know if I'm mixing up riding times or even feeding them the right foods." The bartender, feeling sorry for the guy, tries to think of something he can do. "Why don't you try shaving the tail of one of the horses?" The man stops crying and says, "That sounds like a good idea. I think I'll try it." A few months later, he comes back to the bar in worse condition than he was before. "What's the matter now?" the bartender asks. The fellow, in no condition to be in public, answers, "I shaved the tail of one of the horses. Sob, sob. But it grew back and I can't tell them apart again." The bartender, now just wanting him to shut up or leave, says, "Why don't you try shaving the mane? Maybe that will not grow back." The fellow stops crying, has a few drinks, and leaves. A few months later, the fellow is back in the bar. The bartender has never seen anybody in this sort of state. Without the bartender even asking, the fellow breaks into his problems. I shaved the sob mane of one of the sniff horses and it grew back." The bartender, now furious at the guy's general stupidity, yells, "For crying out loud, just measure the stupid horses. Perhaps one is slightly taller than the other one." The fellow cannot believe what the bartender has said and storms out of the bar. The next day, the fellow comes running back into the bar as if he had just won the lottery. "It worked! It worked!" he exclaims. "I measured the horses and the black one is 2 inches taller than the white one." One night, a dad was walking past his son's room and heard him praying, "God bless Mommy, Daddy, and Grandma, ta-ta, Grandpa." The dad didn't think much of it, but was happy his son was praying. The next morning, they discovered Grandpa had passed away from a heart attack. The dad figured it was just a coincidence, but it still gave him the creeps. The next night, the son prayed again. "God bless Mommy and Daddy, ta-ta, Grandma." Now the dad was really starting to get nervous, but he waited. The next morning, Grandma was found dead, also from a heart attack. By now, the dad was completely freaked out, so he decided to stay up outside his son's door the next night. Sure enough, the boy prayed, "God bless Mommy, ta-ta, Daddy." The dad was terrified and rushed to the doctor the next morning to make sure he was healthy. When he finally got home, his wife was waiting for him on the porch, looking relieved. She said, "Thank God you're home. We really need your help. We found the milkman dead on our porch this morning." A mother and her young daughter were walking through New York City when the mother tried to hail a cab. As they waited, the little girl noticed a group of women dressed in flashy clothes loitering on a street corner. Finally, the mother got a cab and they climbed in. The curious little girl turned to her mother and asked, "Mommy, what are those ladies doing over there?" The mother, trying to dodge the question, replied, "Oh, those ladies are just waiting for their husbands to come pick them up on their way home from work." The cab driver, overhearing the exchange, turned around and said, "Come on, lady, tell your daughter the truth. They're hookers." There was a brief pause of awkward silence. Then the little girl, with a confused look, asked, "Mommy, do the hooker ladies have children?" The mother, without missing a beat, replied, "Of course, dear. Where do you think cabbies come from?" Joe grew up in a town so tiny, the welcome sign didn't bother with welcome. It just said, "Hi." After escaping to the big city for college and law school, he returned home with a dream. In a place this small, being slightly impressive made you a local legend. He'd be the legal eagle of Mayberry, the courtroom king of cornfields. He opened a law office, leather chairs, framed diplomas, and one of those fancy pens you never actually use. He had everything, except clients. Then one day, a miracle. A man walked briskly toward the front door. Joe's heart nearly burst from excitement. His first client, showtime. Thinking fast, Joe grabbed his dead phone and launched into the performance of his life. A full-blown, Oscar-worthy monologue worthy of Law & Order, delusional intent. "No, tell the Wall Street guys I don't do discounts," he barked. "$1 million minimum or I walk. Yes, I'll be in court next week. Lead counsel, obviously. My associates, they're the backup dancers. I'm the Beyoncé of litigation. And someone warned the DA? I can squeeze him in between saving democracy and lunch." 5 minutes of pure, undiluted bluffing. He finally hung up, turned to the visitor with a dazzling grin and said, "Sorry about the wait. Things are a little hectic today. What can I do for you?" The man blinked. "I'm from the phone company. I'm here to install your line." One winter morning in Detroit, a husband and wife were having breakfast while listening to the radio. The announcer said, "We're expecting 8 to 10 inches of snow today. Please park your car on the even-numbered side of the street so the snowplows can get through." Being diligent, the wife bundled up and went outside to move her car. The following week, as they sat down for breakfast again, the radio announcer warned, "We're expecting 10 to 12 inches of snow today. Please park your car on the odd-numbered side of the street so the snowplows can get through." Once again, the wife dutifully went out and moved her car. A week later, they were having breakfast when the announcer began, "We're expecting 12 to 14 inches of snow today. Please park." And suddenly the power went out. Panicked, the wife turned to her husband and said, "Oh no, I don't know what to do. Which side of the street should I park on so the snow plows can get through?" With all the patience and love that comes from years of marriage, the husband gently patted her hand and said, "Honey, why don't you just leave it in the garage this time?" After the Great Britain Beer Festival in London, all the brewery presidents decided to grab a drink together. The president of Corona sits down and says, "Senor, I'll have the finest beer in the world, Corona?" The bartender dusts off a bottle from the shelf and hands it to him. The Budweiser president follows, saying, "I'll take the king of beers, a Budweiser." The bartender serves him one. The Coors president nods and says, "Give me the only beer brewed with pure Rocky Mountain spring water, a Coors." He gets his drink. Then the Guinness president sits down and casually says, "I'll have a Coke." The bartender raises an eyebrow but hands him the soda. The other brewery presidents turn to him, confused. "Why aren't you drinking a Guinness?" they ask. He smirks and replies, "Well, I figured if you guys aren't drinking beer, I won't either." An elderly couple is in bed. After a few minutes of silence, the old man lets out a fart and says, 7 points. His wife turns to him, puzzled, and asks, "What in the world are you talking about?" The old man grins and says, "I'm playing fart football." A little while later, the wife lets one rip and proudly announces, "Touchdown, tie score." 5 minutes later, the old man farts again and declares, "Touchdown, I'm winning 14-7. Frustrated by losing, the wife lets out a big one and shouts, "It's a tie game now." Feeling the pressure, the old man decides he won't lose. He strains with all his might, but instead of a fart, he accidentally poops the bed. The wife hears the noise and asks, "What was that?" The old man calmly responds, "That's the whistle for halftime. Switch sides!" A young pastor sat in a restaurant enjoying his lunch. As he ate, he opened a letter from his mother, which had arrived that morning. When he unfolded it, a $20 bill fluttered onto the table. "Thanks, Mom," he thought. "I really needed this right now." As he finished his meal, he noticed a beggar leaning against a lamppost outside. The man looked down on his luck, and the pastor felt a tug at his heart. He hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. Pulling the envelope back out, he crossed out the names and in large letters wrote, "Persevere." Without drawing attention to himself, he tucked the bill back inside, placed the envelope under his arm, and casually dropped it as he walked past the man. The beggar picked it up, read the message, and smiled. The next day, as the pastor sat down for another meal, he felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he saw the same man, grinning and holding out a thick wad of cash. Bewildered, the pastor asked, "What's this?" The man chuckled. "You're half of the winnings. Persevere came in first in the 4th race at the track yesterday. Paid 30-1. The longtime wine taster at an old vineyard had passed away, and the manager needed a replacement. One day, a scruffy, ragged homeless man walked in and insisted he had the skills for the job. Amused, the manager decided to humor him. He handed the man a glass of wine. The man swirled, sniffed, sipped, and spit. "Red wine Merlot, 3 years old, grown on the south slope, aged in oak barrels." The manager raised an eyebrow. "Impressive!" He handed him another. The man tasted and nodded. "Cabernet, 8 years old, from the northeast slope, stored in steel vats." Now thoroughly intrigued, the manager exchanged a glance with his secretary and smirked. She returned with a mystery glass. The man took a sip, paused, and then announced,
Blonde, 27 years old, 3 months pregnant once. And if I don't get this job, I'll tell you who the father is.
On her birthday, a girl was holding her boyfriend's package, moving it up and down carefully. Her boyfriend, feeling romantic, leaned closer and whispered, "Are you in the mood for some love?" The girl, focused on her task, smiled and softly replied, "No, I just need some glue to seal a few more envelopes." Two couples decided to host a friendly dinner party one evening. During the evening, Jim accidentally dropped his napkin under the table. When he bent down to pick it up, he couldn't help but notice that Bob's wife, Sue, wasn't wearing any underwear under her dress. The shocking discovery left Jim flustered, and in his haste to sit back up, he bumped his head on the table, emerging red-faced and awkward. Later, while Jim was helping himself to drinks in the kitchen, Sue walked in and, with a sly smile, asked, "Did you like what you saw under the table?" Caught off guard, Jim hesitated but finally admitted, "Well, yes, I did." Sue leaned closer and whispered, "If you want it, it'll cost you $500? Jim was stunned but intrigued. After a brief internal debate, he agreed to her proposition. Sue suggested he come by her house Friday afternoon since Bob would be at work. When Friday rolled around, Jim arrived at Sue's house at 2 p.m. sharp. After handing her the agreed $500, they went to the bedroom, and the deal was done. Jim quickly dressed, thanked Sue, and left. That evening, when Bob came home, he casually asked Sue, "Did Jim stop by the house today?" Sue's heart skipped a beat, but she replied, "Why, yes, he did drop by for a little while." Bob nodded and asked, "Did he give you $500? Sue, trying to stay composed, answered, "Well, yes, he did." Bob grinned and said, "Perfect. He stopped by the office this morning and borrowed $500 from me. He promised he'd drop it off at the house today. Glad he kept his word. Now, that is what you call playing the long game." Jim had always dreamed of owning a Harley-Davidson. After years of saving, he finally had enough money to make his dream come true. Excited, he went to the dealership and picked out the perfect bike. While finalizing the purchase, the dealer shared a useful tip. To keep the chrome shiny and rust-free, always have a jar of Vaseline handy. Rub it on the chrome before it rains and it'll stay like new. A few months later, Jim met a wonderful woman who invited him to dinner at her parents' house. Before they went inside, she explained a family tradition. After dinner, the first person to speak would have to do the dishes. Jim agreed and joined them for a lovely meal. After dinner, the room fell silent as everyone waited for someone to break and speak first. 15 minutes passed, and Jim decided to shake things up. He leaned over and kissed his girlfriend passionately. Still, no one said a word. Determined to get a reaction, Jim jokingly reached into his pocket and pulled out his jar of Vaseline. At that moment, the father jumped up and shouted, all right, I'll do the dishes." An elderly gentleman walked into the bank and approached the teller. He handed over his bank card and said, "I'd like to withdraw $20, please." The teller glanced at him and replied, "Sir, for withdrawals under $200, please use the ATM." The old man frowned. "Why is that?" he asked. Irritated, the teller slid the card back to him. "Those are the rules, sir. If you don't need anything else, please step aside. There are other customers waiting." The man remained silent for a moment. Then he handed the card back and said, "All right, I'd like to withdraw all my money instead." The teller sighed but proceeded to check the account. A moment later, her expression changed. She leaned in and whispered, "Sir, you have $500,000 in your account. The bank doesn't keep that much cash on hand. You'll need to schedule an appointment." The old man nodded. "I see. How much can I withdraw immediately?" $5,000 is the maximum per transaction." The gentleman smiled. "All right, I'll take $5,000 then." Now, speaking much more politely, the teller counted out the cash and handed it to him with a warm smile. The old man took $20, placed it in his wallet, and slid the remaining $4,980 back across the counter. "Please deposit this back into my account." It was the final examination for an introductory English course at the local university. The examination was 2 hours long and exam booklets were provided. The professor was very strict and told the class that any exam that was not on his desk in exactly 2 hours would not be accepted and the student would fail. A half hour into the exam, a student came rushing in and asked the professor for an exam booklet. "You're not going to have time to finish this," the professor stated sarcastically as he handed the student a booklet. "Yes, I will," replied the student. He then took a seat and began writing. After 2 hours, the professor called for the exams, and the students filed up and handed them in, all except the late student, who continued writing. A half hour later, the last student came up to the professor, who was sitting at his desk preparing for his next class. He attempted to put his exam on the stack of exam booklets already there. "No, you don't. I'm not going to accept that. It's late." The student looked incredulous and angry. "Do you know who I am?" "No. As a matter of fact, I don't," replied the professor. "Do you know who I am?" the student asked again. "No, and I don't care," replied the professor with an air of superiority. "Good," replied the student, who quickly lifted the stack of completed exams, stuffed his in the middle, and walked out of the room. Upon arriving home, a husband was met at the door by his sobbing wife. Tearfully, she explained, "It's the pharmacist. He insulted me terribly this morning on the phone." Immediately, the husband drove downtown to confront the pharmacist and demand an apology. Before he could say more than a word or two, the pharmacist told him, "Now, just a minute, listen to my side of it. This morning, the alarm failed to go off, so I was late getting up. I went without breakfast and hurried out to the car, just to realize that I locked the house with both my house and car keys inside. I had to break a window to get my keys. Then, driving a little too fast, I got a speeding ticket. Later, when I was about 3 blocks from the store, I had a flat tire. When I finally got to the store, there was a bunch of people waiting for me to open up. I opened the store and started waiting on these people, and all the time the damn phone was ringing off the hook." He continued, "Then I had to break a roll of nickels against the cash register drawer to make change, and they spilled all over the floor. I got down on my hands and knees to pick up the nickels. The phone was still ringing. When I stood up, I cracked my head on the open cash drawer, which made me stagger back against a showcase with a bunch of perfume bottles on it. All of them hit the floor and broke. Meanwhile, the phone is still ringing with no let-up, and I finally get to answer it. It was your wife. She wanted to know how to use a rectal thermometer. And believe me, mister, as God is my witness, all I did was tell her." Roger is a hard worker, and he spends most of his nights bowling or playing volleyball. One weekend, his wife decides that he needs to relax a little and take a break from sports, so she takes him to a strip club. The doorman at the club spots them and says, "Hey, Roger, how are you tonight?" His wife, surprised, asks her husband if he has been here before. No, he's just one of the guys I bowl with." They are seated, and the waitress approaches, sees Roger, and says, "Nice to see you, Roger. A gin and tonic as usual?" His wife's eyes widen. "You must come here a lot." No, says Roger. "I just know her from volleyball." Then a stripper walks up to the table. She throws her arms around Roger and says, "Roger, a table dance as usual?" His wife, fuming, collects her things and storms out of the bar. Roger follows her and spots her getting into a cab, so he jumps into the passenger seat. His wife looks at him, seething with fury, and lets Roger have it with both barrels. At this, the cabbie leans over and says, "Sure looks like you picked up a fare tonight, Roger." A woman was leaving a 7-Eleven with her morning coffee when she noticed a most unusual funeral procession approaching the nearby cemetery. A long black hearse was followed by a second long black hearse about 50 feet behind. Behind the second hearse was a solitary woman walking a pit bull on a leash. Behind her were 200 women walking single file. The woman couldn't stand the curiosity. She respectfully approached the woman walking the dog and said, "I am so sorry for your loss, and I know now is a bad time to disturb you, but I've never seen a funeral like this. Whose funeral is it?" The woman replied, "Well, that first hearse is for my husband. What happened to him?" The woman replied, "My dog attacked and killed him." She inquired further, "Well, who is in the second hearse?" The woman answered, "My mother-in-law. She was trying to help my husband when the dog turned on her." A poignant and thoughtful moment of silence passed between the two women. "Can I borrow the dog?" "Get in line," The agent of a beautiful actress discovered that the actress had been selling her body for $100 a night. The agent, who had fantasized about her for long, had never dreamt that she was so easily obtainable. He approached her and told her how much she turned him on and how he wanted to do her. She agreed to spend the night with him, but said that he would have to pay the same $100 other customers paid. He thought for a while, then said, "Don't I, as your agent, get at least a discount?" "Nope," she said. "If you want me, you have to pay full price like the others." The agent, although unhappy with that, still agreed. That night she came to his apartment after she was done for the day. The agent did her after turning off all the lights. An hour later, she was awakened and vigorously done again. In a while again, she was yet again awakened and made love to. She was impressed with her agent's vitality. "My goodness," she whispered in the dark. "You are so potent. I never realized how lucky I was to have you for my agent." "I'm not your agent, lady," a strange voice said. "He's at the door selling tickets." A lost dog strays into a jungle. A lion sees this from a distance and says with caution, "This guy looks edible. I've never seen his kind before." So the lion starts rushing towards the dog with menace. The dog notices and starts to panic, but as he's about to run, he sees some bones next to him and gets an idea and says loudly, "Oh, that was some good lion meat." The lion abruptly stops and says, "Whoa! This guy seems tougher than he looks. I better leave while I can." Over by the treetop, a monkey witnessed everything. Evidently, the monkey realizes that he can benefit from this situation by telling the lion and getting something in return. So the monkey proceeds to tell the lion what really happened, and the lion says angrily, "Get on my back. We'll get him together." So they start rushing back to the dog. The dog sees them and realizes what happened and starts to panic even more. He then gets another idea and shouts, "Where the hell is that monkey? I told him to bring me another lime an hour ago." A young doctor moved out to a small community to replace an older doctor who was retiring. The older doctor suggested that the young one accompany him on his house call rounds so the community could become used to a new doctor. At the first house, a woman complained, "I've been a little sick to my stomach." The older doctor said, "Well, you've probably been overdoing the fresh fruit. Cut back on the amount you've been eating and see if that does the trick." As they left, the younger doctor remarked, "You didn't even examine that woman," and then asked, "How did you come to the diagnosis so quickly?" "Ah, you noticed I dropped my stethoscope on the floor in there? When I bent over to pick it up, I noticed a half-dozen banana peels in the trash. That was what has probably been making her sick." The younger doctor replied, "Pretty clever. If you don't mind, I think I'll try that at the next house." Arriving at the next house, both physicians spent several minutes talking with a younger woman. She said that she just didn't have the energy she once did and said, "I'm feeling terribly run down lately." "You've probably been doing too much for the church," the younger doctor told her. "Perhaps you should cut back a bit and see if that helps." As they left, the elder doctor said, "I know that woman well. Your diagnosis is almost certainly correct, as she is very active in the church." Then he asked, "But how did you arrive at it?" "I did what you did at the last house. I dropped my stethoscope, and when I bent down to retrieve it, I noticed the pastor under the bed." After retiring, Mr. Johnson moved into a quiet condo by the ocean. Every morning over breakfast, he'd gaze out at the water, and every morning, without fail, he'd see the same young man fishing from the dock. Rain or shine, there he was. But what puzzled Mr. Johnson was this: the man never picked the same spot. Some mornings he'd fish from the left side, other mornings the right. Sometimes he'd sit at the very end. Curiosity finally got the better of him. One morning, Mr. Johnson skipped his toast, got dressed, and made his way down to the dock just as the fisherman arrived. "Excuse me," he said. "I've been watching you for months. Don't worry, not in a weird way. And I've noticed something. Some days you fish from the left, other days the right, sometimes the end. How do you decide where to fish?" The fisherman chuckled. "Easy," he said. "Every morning I wake up and look at my wife. If she's lying on her left side, I fish from the left side of the dock. If she's on her right, I fish from the right. If she's lying on her stomach, I head to the end. Mr. Johnson blinked. Huh, that's original, but what if she's lying on her back? The fisherman gave him a sly grin. On days like that, I don't go fishing.